So as most of you probably know, Roger and James host a podcast called Team Deakins. And I'm guessing that the Team Deakins is not just a clever name for a podcast, it's kind of how you view your working relationship.
Yeah.
So let's start off as you often do with these sorts of things by giving us an overview of what Team Deakins looks like on set. What is this partnership? How does it feel? What does it look like?
Well, we basically, we work as a team, and right from the start, we read the script, we discuss it. Are we going to do it? Are we not? And then as we get into prep, we work together. So I know what he's thinking and what he's planning, which means that I can take some of the meetings so he can be working with the director on storyboards or something like that. So it sort of gives him an extra hand, a clone maybe. And I deal with the visual effects a lot because I know how he wants to shoot it, and visual effects oftentimes wants to shoot it in a different way, but we talk about what elements they need and how we can come to a compromise. And I organize the digital workflow, and I'm the one, when production comes on set, they don't want to bother Roger. They'll come and ask me the questions.
I don't talk much.
So would I be correct in kind of comparing your role to that of like a second company grip, Best Boy grip, to a key? You manage all the.
Well, I don't work for Roger.
Right.
No, I work
Definitely not.
with Roger. I want to make that clear.
No,
Noted.
we really do share it. We really share, kind of talk about a script, talk about the feel of the thing as well, but James started off in a lab in New York, and she's very, very, experienced with the technical side of things. So as the DI came in and digital finish came in, she became more involved in the post work on a film, and it escalated from that, and it just made sense that we were both on a movie together.
Do you feel that working relationship covers all the bases, that it makes you better at your jobs, that it makes your relationship stronger, it gives you more satisfaction working on projects? Is it as broad as that?
Well, I mean, you know what the film industry is like. You're away for months and you come back home, and if you don't work together, it's like you're so hyped up about the last few months' experience you've had, and your partner has not had the same experience, and I think that's can be quite difficult. So yeah, part of it is we love being together, and so the working relationship is I mean, we both basically, it's our lives, working on movies is our lives. So we want to share our lives together as well. There is that.
It does make us an incredibly boring couple while we're shooting, because we'll go home for a weekend and say, all right, we're not going to talk about the film. We're not going to talk about the film. But that one shot, don't you think it was a little too far this way?
Yeah, it's very naive, isn't it? How do you work on a film and not talk about it? Because it is what you really care about most, frankly.
Does that continue when you're not working on a film? Do you talk about what you'd want to do or the past, or do you?
In other words, yes, we're very bored all the time.
I think my wife and I would probably be described similarly. So partnerships being an important process, or an important part of your process, and also ubiquitous on set. What is that? How do you feel that extends to sort of the director partnerships that you have? You've obviously worked with a lot of the same directors for years and years. Do you feel that you gain the same, that you get better at what you do, you get better at communication, and it becomes a more fulfilling experience working over time with someone? Or is it more just that there's somebody you really like to work with, and that it's as simple as that?
Well, I mean, both. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of directors we would love to work with for sure, but how it is, people have their own teams. I was lucky enough to tie up with Joel and Ethan, and however many movies I worked on with them. So it does make a lot of difference, because you don't have to discuss the work as much. You kind of build a kind of understanding of each other, and yeah, I mean, you build on from one film to another, I think, in a really interesting way.
Yeah, you sort of develop a shorthand so it becomes easier, but then when you're working with a new director, it's kind of exciting because they have a different way of thinking and you have to take your mind into theirs. You can tell I was a script supervisor before. You need to think the way they think, and that's kind of a fun thing to do too. So they're both fun.
So what we're hearing is you're available, right? You direct-
Yeah, actually, we really are available if anybody's.
I think this is a good segue. Let's put on that clip, Christy, if you would be so kind as to the clip from Blade Runner. There's no sound, so don't worry. I wanted to talk about that collaborative process, the lack of having to spell everything out. There's a clip that'll come on of the Terrell Corporation, that kind of interior sunlight look. There's a couple different shots in that showing how it applies in different spaces. And I was just kind of curious if you could walk us through how that went from the initial concept, who came up with that, and then through till the execution, all the people you worked with along that process, what your input was, how do we get from an idea to what we see?
Well, I mean, it was interesting on Blade Runner because obviously we worked with Denny twice before. First time on Prisoners, we spent quite a lot of time location scouting and then storyboarding together. And I think we both liked the process so much on Sicario, we spent even more time storyboarding. In fact, at a point we would be in an office and Denny would lock the door from the inside so the production couldn't disturb us. And we basically storyboarded the whole of Sicario. So when we got to Blade Runner, Denny was cutting Arrival up in Montreal. So we went up and stayed in a hotel there, and we would work with the storyboard artist in the mornings, and Denny would come in the afternoons, having to spend the morning in the cutting room, and we were there for weeks, if not months. And again, then we did a lot of scouting in Europe and all over, found we couldn't shoot in London because there was no stage space, blah, blah. We ended up in Budapest and the whole thing just kind of built the whole concept of the world. The interior of the Tyrell Corporation was particular that Denny had always had the idea that LA would be kind of gray and raining and snowing, and that the climate had changed, shifted in that direction. And so I thought, well, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do with an interior? I think, well, you would put sunlight in there. And the irony is, of course, Wallace in the film is blind. But even so, I thought it would be really nice to make a whole series of sunlit environments. So that's basically how I went. We spent hours talking about how to do these sequences. Denny, I think, had the idea of the office surrounded by water, the platform in the water, because he'd been in a Japanese restaurant, I think, and we were struggling to find out what this was. And, it gradually develops. And I looked at some stuff online and saw some architectural drawings of a space with a skylight and the way the sunlight moved across the walls. I thought in the day was interesting. So I took that on board, so you kind of imagine what it could look like, and then you have to find a way to technically achieve it, and then you go to, in this case, it was Billy O'Leary, gaffer, and
Mitch.
Mitch, yes, of course, Mitch was on it,
Yeah.
and the obviously Hungarian crew, and figure out ways to create the look that you have in your head.
It's of course Mitch Lillian, Local 52, Local 80 grip. Your key grip for goodness, quite a while.
I met Mitch on Fargo, and James knew him from way back in New York, early days. And yeah, we just hit it off straight away. I've kind of basically worked with him every film from America anyway.
So yeah, there's that process too, of, you and a director working out, finding the shots, finding the looks, and then communicating that to your grip and electric team. How does that worked over the years? How does that kind of communication between you and them work, both in prep and then even on the day of, put up another 4K or whatever?
The thing that also helps is because I work with them closely and find out what they need. So they've got a person to come to if something happens and they need something in.
Yeah, and we do quite
Mhm.
quite detailed diagrams. you know, I come up with a lighting schematic that we draw out, and then I'll talk to Billy or Mitch or whatever and figure out how it's possible to, if my idea of, like, on one of those, it was like a circle of the night interior of the Wallace office was like 320 betweenies on two circles above that flat platform. But to get to that idea of how it could work and how you could put a chase in it, everything, obviously that's a sort of technical challenge. So, you know, you all sit around a table with a drawing and try and figure it out, you know, and then maybe sometimes do a test and just figure if in that case, we did a little test to show Denny to see if the feeling of the light moving for the scene that was going to take place was okay, or would it be distracting? And he embraced it. And, you know, so it's a thing you sort of build up.
Yeah, and I sit down with them after we figured out how we're going to shoot it and talk about what special equipment is needed for each day. And then I try and do up a calendar, which is the bane of my existence because the schedule changes all the time. And if I started it, I have to finish it. So I'm constantly moving around the schedule, but so we're all
I
clear.
think we both hate it when we've got a piece of equipment standing in the parking lot that's never going to be used, but it's there just in case. So we make up a very, very detailed plan of attack.
Mhm.
So James has to be on top of it if the schedule changes, knowing that we need a certain crane arm for this day or whatever. You know, I really don't like having a lot of equipment standing around. I kind of think everything wants to be at a minimum, and that way, when we argue for a piece of equipment with production, they're usually more understanding why we need it.
Yeah, I've heard you mention a couple times on the assassination of Jesse James that you'd had a condor with some lights up that you killed right before the shot. And it sounds like you still kind of are trying to justify that move to the producers of like, but look at the shot, it's fine.
We were going to kill them, but at the last minute I said, no, just pan them towards the catering tent and maybe nobody will notice they're not on the shot.
Oh, incredible.
But it's funny too, because when we worked in Australia, sometimes we're working with people that we don't know. And so we had a great gaffer and a great key grip there. But I had to talk to them because we went through what we were going to need and they wanted to put more in the trucks. And I had to sit down and talk to them and say, listen, honestly, if he says he only needs that, that's really only what he needs. And the gaffer finally believed me and we had minimal equipment, but the grip truck was big. you know?
Yeah, I've been told that far too many times to ever believe it. Maybe if you told me, but we've been lied to a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I guess on that subject, how do you go about finding your crew and when you go to places you haven't been before? What's your process like? What's the job interview to work with teams Deakins look like?
Well, I mean, in the camera side, it's usually whoever Andy Harris finds, because I've worked with Andy Harris since meeting him on Shawshank. And yeah, so that's many, many years. So it's really up to him how he figures out what the camera crew is. And you know, obviously when we went to Australia, we couldn't take too many people from here. But I mean, again, Andy would come and Bruce would come, my dolly grip, which again, I met Bruce on Barton Fink, which was one of the early films I shot in America. And we just hit it off and we basically done all but 2 or 3 movies together, you know?
But one of the things is the production always wants to give us the CVs of the most experienced grips and gaffers, and we would prefer a person maybe with less experience but more passion for it. So we are always asking, you know, for other CVs that aren't necessarily the top guy in the field, you know, in that particular area.
Yeah, when we went, Jesse James, I noticed there was a clip of that earlier. Marty Keogh was I don't think he gaffed a film before, Assassination of Jesse James, and I don't think he gaffs that many films now. I might be wrong. I haven't really kept in touch, but it was like a big chance. But he was so into the project, you know. It was just his enthusiasm, and obviously he was an experienced electrician. So I felt, you know, that you sort of make a judgment on character as much on as on sort of experience, frankly. Yeah.
I think it worked for you in 1984, right?
Sorry?
It worked for you in 1984, right? That your
Well,
gaffer, it was his first
Yeah,
big show that he ever gaffed?
Biggles, John Higgins. Yeah, we'd done, he'd been rigging gaffer on some rock videos I'd done, and he'd done such a great job. And when I got the chance to do 1984, I said, well, yeah, let's do it together, because we really got on. And again, I mean, most of the films that I shot in England, I think all the films I shot in England, he's been gaffer on. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, loyalty in this business is an incredibly important thing. It makes your life easier, makes your job better. At least that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So, let's talk about style. What do you feel that you have a style that you could define? Something that, sets a Roger Deakins film apart from a non-Roger Deakins film, or is that kind of per project, or what do you bring with you?
I think
when
the
somebody
only
hires
thing
you?
I do is like keep it as simple as I possibly can. I'm a simple person.
Your definition of simple and everyone else's in this room might be slightly different. I've
Yeah,
seen
but
your
there
rigs.
might be 300 odd betweenies in a circle, but the actual concept is really simple.
Like the atomic bomb, the concept is simple.
Exactly. Yeah. Split the atom. Yeah.
So you pressed, you don't have a style as far as you would say. There's not I mean, not using a backlight, trying to keep a subject in a frame.
Oh, see, that's a sort of a bit of a myth, but yeah,
Mm.
I mean,
Right.
I'd use a backlight if shooting towards the door, it'd be backlit. I mean, I guess my style comes from naturalism, and even in that sequence we were just talking about from Blade Runner, the different kind of lights, it's still it's still natural. That's what light does, I'm always trying to create a world that an audience can actually relate to, that they feel, well, I could be in that lighting situation. It's not something that where I read, Three Suns or this is science fiction, but you know what I mean? You want to create something that is believable, and you could be in that environment. Yeah.
How do you determine when less is more is the answer? Or,
It pretty much always is.
Yes. Just stop right there.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen the stacks of Dinos and stuff, but sometimes so you have something like in Prisoners where there's that scene in the basement that's the flashlight and like a gold bounce or something up high. And then there's Skyfall with your stack of Dinos, or Blade Runner with all the lights. How can you tell when a setup is going to call for, unloading the truck and, multiple days of rigging, like when you need to do big versus when, you can get away with something smaller? How do you?
Well, I mean, I suppose I've been lucky mostly working with directors that talk about the project a lot and do a lot of prep, and you'd
Know
say,
what they're going for, yeah.
yeah, I mean, the idea of that Tower of Light on 1917, yeah, it was probably the biggest single lighting setup I've ever done. But it's actually really simple. You've got a burning church, it's one light source. When we were mapping it out, we were mapping out the ruin of the town. We had, instead of, as a light source for what was going to be the burning church, I had a 40-watt bulb sitting in the model to see what it was going to do. So basically, I was just recreating a 40-watt bulb when I did it full scale.
I know that makes sense when you say it. Maybe in 20 or so years, it'll seem more intuitive to me, but incredible.
Well, no, somebody said to me when I really starting out, they said, well, if you can light a human face, you can light anything. It's all about scale.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's step away from lighting then for a minute, because I think you said on the podcast once that if you had to give up any part of your job, it would be lighting.
You're going to quote me here. And
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I just have to show off that I did my prep. No, I'm curious because you often talk about your documentary background and how finding the action in a shot or finding the moment with the actors may be inspired from that. You want to just talk about kind of your philosophy internally for how you move the camera, how you find what's important, or I think you've also said how you put the audience in the scene, how you choose to do that and how you feel that out.
Yeah, I just like to be connected to the image. I mean, obviously, sometimes you're shooting action sequence or something where you've got multiple cameras, you're not necessarily operating, but it's rare, or you're working with a Steadicam operator. But I usually like to be connected to the camera. I mean, that's just the way I've evolved, I suppose. And I would, if it was one or the other, I would give up lighting. There's no question about that. I think just I think the framing and the way the camera reacts to the scene and the actors or the situation in front of it, I think that's the most important thing, really, to me anyway.
How did documentary help you hone those skills or start off thinking that way?
Well, I think anytime you've got a camera, whether it's still camera or documentary, but I mean, I think documentary in particular, the kind of films I did, you didn't get take two, you know, they weren't so much, you know, interviews and constructed documentaries. They were kind of following an action or trying to interpret a situation. So you're reacting to something in front of you. And I love it on a film. Yeah, I mean, most of the directors I suppose I work with do a lot of storyboarding. But even having done that, they usually rehearse with the actors in the morning of the day of the shoot, and it's a reactive. You react to what the actors are bringing to the scene and how they physically move around the set. And it doesn't matter how much you storyboard, you can't storyboard that. So I think for me, the documentary experience really helps on those at that time, you know.
I think also documentaries, because you can't do it again, you have to think right then and there very quickly, what is the best shot to tell the story? And you're getting a lot of practice at that. And that comes in handy sometimes when you're shooting, because you're on a day where you don't have enough time and where they've just changed the action at the last minute and you've got to go right away. You're able to find that shot that's right.
And that relates
quickly.
to, I mean, again, the directors we work with mostly shoot single camera and they know exactly what the coverage is going to be. I mean, the first time I worked with Joel and Ethan, I could count 9 shots maybe we did that weren't in the final film, maybe 10. But it was that kind of thing, you know. On Fargo, we shot 120,000 feet of film, I think it was, which you think about what most people shoot, there's nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, that's very minimal. So you really want to make the shot count. It's like, again, it's like simplifying a scene down to its elements and concentrating on getting those shots as best you can, rather than just spraying it with multiple cameras or multiple different setups.
So do you find then that doing fewer takes or fewer rehearsals and fewer takes leads to better results? Just kind of, obviously it's situational, but kind of, is that the vibe that you get, that generally, if you can find that magic in those moments, then
I think it's one way of doing it. I mean, on the other hand, the first film I did with Sam Mendes, it was like, I thought we were going to storyboard it. And he said, no, let's just shoot the rehearsals handheld and we'll just work it as we go along. So, you know, basically Sid and Nancy was like that. After a few days of shooting, I realized it was going to be so, for a better word, chaotic, that I thought I'd just shoot it handheld. And you know, it worked, I think, because that chaos did come into the material, I think, in a positive way. So there's not one way of doing it, you know.
But also when you say whether more takes are better, it really depends on the actors that you're working with, because sometimes you're working with, sometimes unfortunately in a 2-shot with an actor that's best on take 2 and someone that takes up to take 7 to really get it. And it's just their process. So you have to kind of work around that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're Long Walk Home was shooting, it was Sissy Spacek and Whoopi Goldberg, and Whoopi would say to director Richard, I've done 2 takes, that's it. And Sissy likes to she sort of gets warmed up by 10 or 12. And it's really difficult, you know, doing a 2-shot.
do you find that it's difficult for you to keep the kind of magic of discovery or just difficult for the actors and you're just kind of trying to help keep them comfortable?
Well, I think so much of the job of a cinematographer and the camera crew and everybody else and the grips and electric is to create the space for the actors to do their thing. So at that point, if you're doing 10 takes or if you're doing 90 takes, you're trying to be as yeah, again, as minimal as possible here in the background and be supportive to whatever's going on in the set, But I mean, obviously, it can come, sometimes get frustration when you can get to 90 takes and you think, well, take 2 was pretty good. What are we doing now?
So I know from speaking to some of our guests that you were definitely an inspiration to many people out there. And you've spoken about some of your inspirations like Conrad Hall and some of the still photographers. And then, of course, also you caution people not to emulate the style of a photographer or director of photography,
Copy, yeah,
right,
not
don't
to
copy. So how would you guide people who want to be inspired by you, but not to copy you? What's the distinction in your mind? Like, how can you take inspiration from someone without, running the risk of emulation?
Well, I think there's, there's a split between the way you see and technically how you achieve something, and that's yeah, you can be inspired by other work, but I mean, I realized when we did Blade Runner 249, I mean, I knew there was no way I was going to like Jordan Cronenworth. I mean, it was just I can't like that. Maybe it's because I don't see like that, but I couldn't like that anyway. But his work inspires me, and Conrad Hall's the same. I mean, I know the way he lights some of, or used to light his shots. I wouldn't do it like that, but the result is something I can really appreciate and it inspires me. I think you have to find your own way of doing it and just figure, yeah, I mean, it sounds weird, really, but I mean, I don't think unless I have a personal connection to the image that's the camera's recording, that I care about being there.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That's what's really important to me. How you do it, the technical stuff, the choice of lens. I mean, I've said a lot of times, I don't really care about choosing a lens. I want a lens to be as clean, as sharp, and as fast and as lightweight as I can get. And that's all I need. I don't need a lot of bokeh or whatever they call it. I don't need all the sort of bells and whistles. I just want something really simple because I want to connect in some personal way to the image that I see in the lens, and that's where you need to get to, I think, personally, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's your taste and you can achieve it because you know it, it's your taste. But when you're trying to copy someone, you're almost doing something that's foreign to yourself.
Right.
Do you think that desire for a simple way of doing things or the easy way of doing things, not saying easy in a bad way, is what led you in the digital direction? Was it not faffing about with mags and all of that? Or was it not as direct as that? Was it an interest in a new technology that you wanted to explore?
No, I think there was like a point, a tipping point where for me, I think the advantages of working digitally, just outweighed film. I mean, I love film. I mean, I shot film long enough. I love film emotion, but I do, there's certain things about modern technology, like, having a monitor on set so that everybody, from the director to the makeup artist can see what you're shooting. I mean, I know a lot of cinematographers, my generation, probably say, well, it's taken away the mystery. It was so nice when it was a black box and nobody
You were
saw
the
it.
only one that knew.
And I really kind of liked it when there was a monitor on set and I could say to a Sam or Joel, can we play this in silhouette? And they would see what I mean by silhouette, and and the framing, and I like that communication. with a that more immediate communication with a director. So I think all, you know, digital technology, I don't really care about. Well, I care about image quality, but that wasn't really what it was for me. You know, there was a sort of point where the advantages of shooting with a digital camera and using the technology of video assist and everything else, I thought was better than.
But it was also when the Alexa came out, and the Alexa was different in their color space. And when we saw the prototype, it made us think, okay, well, maybe because color space is so important and it can create a very different image if you I can usually tell which camera was used by what the colors end up. So when we saw the Alexa, that, oh, here's something that we could try.
But I think the other thing's really important that when I was shooting film, I was always trying to minimize things. I remember reading once when it was James Wong Howe said, and towards his end of the career, he got down to lighting a set with 10 lights, whereas early in his career, he might have used 60. And he wished he had longer so he could get down to one. And I felt I've always been like that. I've always been trying to work with practical sources and minimal amount of light, even if it might be a big source, you know, like the burning church or something. It's still one source. I've been trying to minimize things and use natural sources. And when we were doing Skyfall, I realized there was so much night work on that and so much stuff in the London sewers and stuff. I thought, well, you know, it makes sense to go digital just to have that extra latitude and also the confidence in being able to see what you shoot. And being able to take more risks, frankly, because you're not taking a risk, you see it.
And you used a lot of practicals in Skyfall, didn't you? Some of those whole sets were almost.
Yeah. But I'm going to say I've always done that. But, you know, instead of now having to boost everything with you know, much larger bulbs and all the rest of it, now you can work in a lower light level, or you can work with a deeper stop. It gives you just more, you know, advantages of play with how you do record the image.
And do you like the technological, I don't know, efficiency maybe that you get with things like using a DMX more on set with all the wireless lights and the sky panels and having your lighting programmer and you say, do this, do that, or does that help, or is it
I was
complicated?
just thinking the other day on No Country for Old Men, we lit all these streets in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and we had lights everywhere. And I had little squeezes, dimmers on each light that hung down to the street so I could adjust things that were up there. And then we went to England to do Skyfall, and the dimmer operator, Steve Matty, I was trying to do a pre-light. I had all these lights everywhere. I was trying to do a pre-light, and he was in the middle of the stage on his iPhone. And I said, are you going to finish with that soon so we can start pre-lighting? You know, it wasn't. He was on the program on his iPhone. I'd never seen anything like it. Blew me away.
Do you like it? Do you think it's handy?
I think it's amazing. And I think like what Steve was doing was fantastic, and in certain situations. But sometimes I wish I had a little squeeze down here so I could change it, and I didn't have to go over to the dimmer board or go on to Steve's iPhone, and it goes all. You know what I mean?
What about things like video walls? Have you played around with any of that stuff? I know you're one of the great poor man's process shooters. Have you used video walls and doing stuff like that, or full volume stages?
Well, we haven't actually done that many films lately. So no, I haven't actually used that technology. I mean, I think in certain places it's fantastic. And what Greg Fraser did with it on Batman was obviously that's a wonderful piece of work and of use of a new technology. But the problem I see is the problem I have is I like a real world. I don't like standing in a stage and having something around me that's not actually there.
What about your work in animation? how do you, obviously it's different. It's
That,
real in its own way, in its own world, but how do you get inside of those spaces?
well, I mean, that is a very different way of working, isn't it? I mean, you're either in a camera capture room and you're walking around with a monitor that's reflecting something that's not there, but you've got sensors all around the stage, so you're actually in a virtual world. Or you're creating it from scratch. I mean, it's a very different way of, well, I say it is, but it's not anymore, is it? Because the two disciplines, as we always figured, are really becoming one. They're almost inseparable.
Well, it was interesting when we started in animation, the key thing was to kind of get the camera to work the way a camera normally worked, because when they were free in animation to have the dolly go right through the wall and then back through the wall and around, they weren't thinking of what was realistic if you were actually shooting it. So for us, we were bringing them back into what's uh, what you would face if you were shooting a movie, and then they were,
Yeah.
because what they were creating ended up seeming more realistic, because we're all used to not being able to go through walls unless, you can figure
Right.
that there was a rig set up.
But it was also the cutting language of live action,
Mhm.
whereas kind of, because the first thing we worked on was Wally with Andrew Stanton. And he wanted it to feel like live action. So it was like, okay, why is the camera on a wide now and pushing in? Or why do we cut to a close-up? What the reverse? And so they weren't doing that so much in animation at that point. And they're not now, because they're still doing a lot of wide angle. We just rove around the scene.
And we also did a lot of tests with a film camera with different lenses on it, so they could see what a 50 did versus a 75 versus a 32 or something. And they could see what happened to the frame, and they could emulate that instead of
Yeah.
using like a 63.5 millimeter lens, that they could.
Yeah, so I mean, the animated movies we've worked on with like Gore on Rango and then at DreamWorks, I mean, they've all been trying to go down that road, and it's basically like live action, but yeah, you don't have a real set, but it's the same language, and that's what we've enjoyed about it.
So yeah, it sounds like you're bringing the language of film into animation.
A little bit, and
Yeah.
lighting in particular, because when we did the first How to Train Your Dragon, it was like, oh, we got to see all the corners of the set, and we did some tests with a candlelit scene, and like most of the background's just gone, and a lot of people go, oh, I don't know, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was saying, oh, I don't know about this, and then gradually it came round, and we had one viewing of some dailies with Jeffrey, and he said, yeah, that's really good. Do you think it's too light? And everybody started clapping because he'd come round that you actually use shadow as much as you use light.
But you get a lot of pushback from the animation department, because they've created these characters and worked really hard on an expression, but that character is now in shadow, so you don't see the expression. So we used to be the bane of the animation department.
Like set dressers and production designers have some similar complaints with dark lighting sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
I heard some chuckles.
Well, it can be. I know when I was starting early on, I mean, yeah, I was starting out, so I didn't have a reputation or anything. And I remember lighting a couple of sets and the production designer going to the producer and saying, I can't see the corner of my set.
Telling on you.
Or my ceiling's not in shot. And he go, really?
So on technology, there have been questions people have asked about artificial intelligence and the direction that technology might take, building off of things like video walls and expanding into that space. What are your thoughts about what that's going to mean for the work of cinematographers, the work of people on set? What do you think of the next 5, 10 years? Do you see big changes in a as big as digital replacing most of film sort of way? Are you optimistic? Are you going to go out and adopt all the new technologies and run with them? Are you going to be resistant? Are you?
I've always thought of filmmaking, what I enjoy most about filmmaking is the collaboration and the crew people I work with, you know, the feeling. I mean, I had it on one of the first films I worked on, 1984, and we had it on 1917. You get a shot and you come off the camera and the director say, okay, I think we got that. And crew would high five or whatever, especially on 1917. It was such a wonderful experience having working with a whole team to the same end, you know, like somebody said, it's the nearest thing you can get to socialism. Everybody's working as a group towards the same end. And yes, I think AI is going to be used on certain films and there'll be far less human interchange. I'm sure that's true, but I'm hoping it's not going to take over the filmmaking that we've always loved, you know.
I think in the long term, that will be successful. Let's just hope that the short term is good too, right? People demand the kind of art that, you know, you guys create and we all create. And so I think there's a market for it. We just need to convince the
Hope
market.
so, yeah.
Well, I think you've all heard enough from me for a bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and open up some Q&A. We have a microphone here, which will jump to the other side of that monitor somewhere near the end of what I'm saying now. But I do have a couple questions from Zoom. So from our wonderful Zoom attendees, hello everyone, and welcome. Thank you as well. And I think one of the here's a softball one, which I don't have an. Oh no, I do have softball.
Softball? No, it's
Like-
soccer, but
A footy question for you, which comes from Michael Wolf, who asks, "What was your favorite movie of 2023?"
we really liked Past Lives and
Perfect
Perfect
Days.
Days. And also American Fiction.
Oh, yeah.
So anybody out here who wants to ask a question, that microphone is yours. Just go ahead and line up behind it, and we'll take. Come on, don't be shy. Anyone?
Okay,
I'll keep talking. I got Craig coming over there. There we go.
All right.
You mentioned that you've worked with your dolly grip for a really long time. I wonder if you could speak to your relationship and how you come up with your movement and how you collaborate with your dolly grip.
Well, it's how you come up with a movement. I mean, it's so much about the director, it's the storyboarding process and everything. But what Bruce has always been so good, he's always known the script as well as anybody else on the set. And you know, it's really interesting to have somebody. I mean, not he's only very sensitive to what the camera's seeing and moving the camera and stuff, but he's always sensitive to why are we moving the camera? And now sometimes you say, well, why are you moving the camera? And it put you on the spot and you go, oh yeah, you're right. Why are we moving the camera? You know, so it's again, I mean, he's a lovely guy, but it's a combination of his relationship to the script but also his confidence with the technology, because we started off early on working with a aerocrane jib arm and a little remote head, a classic power pod head. And it's kind of difficult for some people to get used to that sort of idea of using that system, even if you're not moving the camera very much. But on a film like Beautiful Mind, for instance, it wasn't so much to move the camera, it was adjust to what the actors were doing from take to take. And so that sort of relationship became really important for me if I'm operating remotely. And it was just like he could sense where the camera needed to be, you know. So it was a real, yeah.
And also, you guys worked together for so long. People would comment on the fact that you'd be on the dolly and he would be behind, and you had these hand motions, and you would just do this or that or this, and Bruce knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Nobody else did, and you know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your time today. It's very
Hmm.
gracious.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering, I am faced with just everybody constantly following trends these days. Like everybody's going symmetrical now. They want to keep lines perfectly straight. They want to go flat to things. or when people went bokeh. So there's just constantly trends that are happening, and then everybody's trying to jam all those trends into the images that they're doing. How do you face that? Are you dealing with that, or do you just ignore it, or do you try to embrace it, or what?
No, but I think I've always ignored it because I mean every script's different and demands something different. I think demands its own approach. I mean, but you're right. I mean, think when Steadicam was invented, everybody wandered around with a camera, but just because you can do it doesn't mean it's thing that you should do. You know, it's like I've said before. You know, less is more. Sometimes, don't you think you kind of watch a film and you think, why are they doing all that? Why is there all this pretty colored backlight? I mean, it doesn't really help the story, you know, and I think you can be too easily seduced by something that's beautiful for its own sake, you know, like, you know, filtration. I mean, in the 70s, there was a whole, you know, after Elvira Madigan and that, everybody was using filtration. It was beautiful, long lenses and the backgrounds are out of focus. Personally, I just find that just beauty for its own sake, you know.
Thank you.
This is more of a photography and documentarian question. I recently rewatched Sicario and I noticed some of the shots in Kate's apartment and shots with her specifically were really evocative of Nan Goldin's work in Ballad of Sexual Dependency. And I wondered if that was happenstance or a more conscious effort to reference that book.
Very happenstance because I didn't notice any of that work until maybe a year ago.
No, of course it's not high enough, so we'll do this. I first off, just want to thank you. I come from a pretty desolate place. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and your films developed the language I have for cinema and gave me and my family and my friends who all watch movies together a chance to travel when we couldn't afford it. So thank you very much. To that end, okay. I have a 7-year-old nephew. He loves Rango, as do I. And when you go through your CV, there is something about just not that film, but your work in animation. And I was wondering if there was something that inspired you when you were younger seeing films, or what got you into that space and what you thought of the work that Lord Miller did this year in Spider-Verse.
You like Felix the cat when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, James knows me. Yeah, no, the first films I ever saw was my dad used to show us cartoons. You could rent cartoons from the local post office, little reels of film, and I remember watching Felix the Cat and Mickey Mouse, and yeah, that's my first experience of movies, and that stayed with me, I guess.
Hi, good afternoon. As technology changes, it changes with lighting as well. Have you made a big switch between the new lighting and LED versus old school Fresnel and beautiful lights?
I think that's, yeah, no,
No bias in the question.
no, I'm with you.
They're
Bias. I'm
biased.
old. I can ask the bias
I'm
question.
with you there. My favorite light is a 1K Fresnel,
Gotcha.
you know, I mean, or 2K Fresnel. But yeah, I mean, again, I said, well, we haven't actually shot that many movies the last few years, given the way the world's been. But on Empire Light, yeah, we totally embraced LEDs, and it was wonderful. It's funny how, you know, films come along and technology comes along at the same time. Like we couldn't have done 1917 without certain stabilizing systems. And Empire Light, we couldn't have shot that. Well, we could have, but it would have been really hard to shoot that cinema lobby, which was a set, but it's built on location, and to be able to balance the interior with the exterior and not burn the set down, and you know, to do it all with LEDs and have that control, and yeah, and have a dimmer operator, and it's all on an iPad. I mean, it's kind of wonderful. So yeah, I would totally embrace that kind of technology in certain situations, but then in another situation where we were filming in a set that was Olivia's apartment, I was using inkies and tweenies because I love the lights. So, I mean, just the situation.
Thank you.
When was the last time you used an arc light? Do you remember?
I do very specifically. Yeah, it was actually well, 1984 we used a lot, and Biggles, bless him, had never used one, nor had I. So they turned up and said, we just read about them in the American Cinematographer, I guess, and they worked very well. And then the last time I used one was on White Mischief. Yeah.
Hey, Roger, I just want to ask you about what's there a way to kind of get your mental game going, like in between projects, and like how do you keep yourself sharp? I feel like as you like DP, like a lot of times you're really working by yourself, or like you're not really like I guess like in between projects really. Yeah, I just want to know if you've gone through that or you've kind of experienced, or maybe.
Yeah, we both do, don't we? In between projects, sometimes it can be a bit of a downer. Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I just love the medium. I mean, it's different. It's interesting now. Well, during the pandemic, we started this podcast, and it's kind of interesting because it's kept us connected with the world of film, but we actually haven't physically been doing that much.
Yeah, but keeping, I think your still photography helps you get through because you're still doing something image wise.
Yeah.
Do you see those as wholly separate? Your still photography and your cinematography, or where does, on the spectrum, where do those lie?
They're separate, but sometimes I take a photo. I come back home, I've been taking a photograph, and it was like it's a bigger high than working on a movie.
Yeah.
It's weird sometimes if I get a photograph I really like. Yeah, I haven't ever taken many, but I can remember one I took a couple of years ago in England, and I thought, wow, that's a really great photograph.
You've taken some recently
many,
too.
yeah,
that's
yeah,
really
yeah.
good. It just takes time for you to appreciate them.
Yeah.
Hi, hey, James and Roger.
Hey.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys again. So if you were limited to one focal length of a lens on a feature, which focal length would it be? And I have a
What
feeling,
format?
let's just say Super 35 area Alexa. I have a feeling I know what it would be.
32.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could choose any focal length, why would it be a 35? I have a
35, but yeah, it depends. I like on the LF now, it'd be a 35, but
I have a question from the internet, so I'm gonna jump in front real quick and then, which this is from Tyler Fukuda. Good question. What is the simplest piece of advice that has helped you the most as a cinematographer? Can you think of anything that you've learned along the way that, somebody passed on to you or that you just picked up?
yeah. I went through a bad time getting fired off a couple of movies, and Conrad Hall laughed and said, well, you're nobody till you've been fired off 3 movies.
Did you get all 3?
Yeah, I did went for a trifecta, yeah.
No, you had 2.
Well, did I
Yeah.
leave or was I
You
fired?
left, you left.
So one more. We're waiting for the third one then.
Hey, thank you so much for the podcast, Roger. My question deals with more people skills and the collaboration you spoke about, which is you said something that just rung a bell was, a builder or a wardrobe being like, oh, I don't see my ceiling here, and things like that that come up in set with people you're collaborating with. That when you're in the middle of tunnel vision trying to make the day, and you get, not to be rude, but a silly moment like that or a question, how do you handle that? Not just that person or that situation, but the amount of those that happen in a day as a DP. Kind of like the little foxes that can be so distracting when the real big picture is not being addressed, whether it's your mood and lighting or just someone kind of coming and trying to make it about something that's not really about
My job.
the machine.
That's often what I do.
Well, what do we do when
They
we
James is
have
good
you?
at that.
Just because it just takes time to talk to them and just say, well, no, I understand what you're saying, but you have to understand that we're not seeing this and blah, 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 or whatever. And because I think when Roger's shooting, he doesn't have the time because he's trying to get to the next shot. But there are concerns from other people, and sometimes it's because they don't know what's coming next or whatever. And I end up talking to them a lot. A lot of times it's when something's been moved and they don't understand why, the set dresser or something, and it's all, worried about it and would normally stop the procedure, but then they don't really even realize that it's not in frame or something like that. So it's just.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think you do have to understand that anybody that's passionate about what they do, whether it's hair, makeup, art department, the painter, or whoever, they're passionate about what they do, and that's great. So you also got to be a bit cautious about that. If you don't see a corner of a set or something, you kind of got to explain it, and you got to be quite forgiving, because I would be the same if somebody.
You are
it-
when they don't cut in your night shots.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, you're not so
or in
forgiving.
post-production, somebody wants to change a shot from high contrast to flat green or something. I don't know. Nobody's ever done it. But if they did, I would get very irate,
Mhm.
and I would send James at them.
Thank you so much.
Just a reminder to anybody on Zoom, if you want to ask questions, go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll try to get them up to me so we can have your voice continue too.
Hi, thank you so much again for being here. And I was just curious, one of my favorite films of yours is Assassination of Jesse James. And the scene where the James gang is doing the train robbery, there's a rig as the train approaches, connects with the camera rig. I know in your podcast, you talked a little bit about the simplicity, that it wasn't as complicated as it came off. As Phil said to me, I think we have different definitions of simple because that was an amazing shot. And I was just wondering, is that something you kind of did on the day? Or was that all totally planned out from the get-go, and what the process and the type of rig you used for that was?
Well, all the shots were planned out, but that particular shot, we were trying to get our head around, and we were using sort of flatbed and thinking if we could get it up to speed, and we had a crane arm with a camera sort of offset. And we were practicing like that with a train, and it didn't sync up. And it was getting dark, and I thought, well, we've got to start shooting because we don't have a lot of time to shoot the whole sequence, let alone this one shot. So I said to Rick, the key grip, I said, "Oh, just take all this off and give me some polystyrene and some foam, packing foam." And I just put the camera on the packing foam. I said, well, and a big sort of buffer of foam on the front of the flatbed. And I said, well, if we get in trouble, I can grab the camera and get out of there. So we just did that. And the first take is what's in the film, I think.
We're gonna ask, so you didn't do any tests, you just tried it out and that's what worked?
Yep.
Wow. Thank you very much.
And just to be clear, you were on that flatbed that was being hit by the train.
Yeah, we had the camera down. I was holding the top of the camera, Harry, and there was a big rubber pad there, and the thing was hitting us. I mean, it was fair away from the train to get the shot of the front of the boiler. Yeah, but it was just hitting that.
One of the problems with it all is that Andrew wasn't happy because it was a smaller train than he wanted. And so we were doing everything that we could to make it look bigger.
Or not see it at all.
Yeah, right.
Did it look big when it was coming right towards you on that?
Everything does.
And it did.
Hi, my name is Brandy Tannehill. I'm a local AD grip, so I don't have a technical question for you. What hobbies or other pursuits have informed your, I guess, artistic outlook? I was looking through your Byways book that we are shilling here. And I really thought that there was a lot of emotion that related to like interpersonal connection that I saw coming through some of those photos, like the hands being held on the outside of the train car. And I was wondering if, personal experiences that you've had or other hobbies have maybe framed how you look at things when you're creating your art?
Oh, I think everything you experience does, you know, I mean, right back when I was a kid, I used to go fishing all the time, and I still do. And just being out now I have a little boat. I go out fishing. It's the light, the things you see. It's all inspiring. Another day we might be going to a museum or something. You know, everything you see and take in is informs you as a person, doesn't it? I think.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, it's a waste.
Do you get most of that inspiration from the not the arts, from your experience with the real world and with people, or is that shared between going to art galleries, looking at photos, seeing other movies?
I think it's everything. I got a fairly narrow, you know, the painters are like, it's kind of very narrow field, really. I'm kind of particular on things like that. I think I love just walking. If we go somewhere, you know, we're shooting somewhere at the weekend, I'll just go, I'll drive, I'll walk around a town that I don't know for hours and hours. I just love exploring places and just watching, just observing, you know, and I think that for me, it's very important, you know, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a question for both of you. I was hoping you could share maybe a memory or a moment that you guys had in your career that reinforces that idea of how part of my favorite thing of working in movies is the collaboration. And so if you could share a memory that you had together that you just really love that you got to have that together and showed that you achieved something really great in the moment, or if it was just a moment after a take or something like that.
Well, I was saying there was moments after takes on 1917, but I think our most personal kind of memory might be working on Kundun with all the Tibetans on that film. Not necessarily about doing a particular take. It was just the experience working with these people who were just so passionately involved in what we were doing, you know.
Yeah, getting to know them and kind of standing up for them too, because Disney didn't want to give them some craft service and stuff like that, and we were shooting in Morocco in the middle of summer, and they of course had to wear the heavy gowns and everything, so it was really quite hard. But having that opportunity to get to know them, and I spent a lot of time. I ended up working 7 days a week on that because Marty wanted to see dailies on Sunday. But that extra half day, I spent a lot of time with the kids because I was worried because it wasn't really a kid-friendly set, and I want to make sure they were okay. So that made us get to know the Tibetans more. So we ended up going to have Sunday dinners with them and everything. So it was really a very special experience, and plus we hear from them a lot even now, so.
Yeah, it is remarkable how a lot of the highlights of working on set aren't actually things that end up on the final picture.
Yeah.
The
That's-
carnival life. Yeah. I have a good question here from on Zoom, which sort of, I guess, maybe sort of ties into what you were saying, which is from Reginald. What do you do to prep for shooting in a location that you think is going to be challenging? You know, what are some of your main concerns when going, you know, be it the middle of the desert or somewhere far from logistics, or, you know, what are some important things you want to make sure that you've got sorted?
It just varies so much.
Mm.
I mean, it can be, you know, say in a desert. I mean, then it goes to Andy Harris and how you care for the equipment. If it's cold place or hot place or wet place or whatever, those sort of technical issues. I think, you know, sometimes, in fact, probably always, we read a script, or certainly I read the
Mhm.
script. When I'm reading the script, I go, "How the hell?" Or it feels like you know, sometimes it feels like a challenge that's you can't overcome. But it's all about getting in the director's head, getting a production designer's head, getting a team around you, and then gradually analyzing how you're going to do it and approaching each thing as an individual problem, not looking at the whole thing as being insurmountable. And that was certainly true on something like Blade Runner, you know.
And also my theory is that you decide you're going to do a movie and you look at it and there's always one segment that you dread. You're just sure it's going to be awful and you're never going to get it. And how in the world is it ever going to work? So you end up prepping that much more. And on Unbroken, it was doing the plane sequences. It just seemed so complicated. And because we worked so hard on it, and it was in February towards the end of the shoot. And so we had that whole shoot and I just worried about it the whole time. And then we did it and it was the easiest part because we had done so much work on it.
Yeah, that's
So,
the thing. You kind of worry more about the things you're more worried about, and then they come out okay, usually.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing too is in the beginning when you're prepping and you don't really know the production and what you're up against. And you have to make certain decisions. For instance, I work with the guys and we're trying to figure out how many mags we need to rent for the movie. And that really depends on the editorial department. Are they going to turn it around when they say? And you've got to figure out whether they will or not. Is the production department not going to deliver back those mags to you on time? So it's all those variables that you have to guess at because you don't want to overestimate it, but you have to a degree, so you don't get caught not having a mag on the day.
It's also, you know, that I was like I was saying before, you know, you kind of got an idea in your head, and then you kind of analyze it and talk with you talk with your team, and then it was like there was one scene I think you showed a bit of it earlier in Blade Runner where I had this. They were going down this almost down these steps of this kind of Egyptian sort of temple with all these, past mannequins of
This is Las Vegas you're talking about?
no, going down
Oh.
the steps with all the
The old replicant models.
yeah, the
yeah.
replicas in
that one. Oh,
glass. And I wanted the idea of just this light traveling across the whole thing. Well, I had no idea how to do it, but Billy got together with Mitch, and it was like they figured out we'll have 4 different sleds, and we'll put a bare bulb on, and they got these bulbs from actually Barbizon in New York and had them sent out. And so they had these bare bulbs and they put cages around them so they wouldn't, when they blew up, they wouldn't hurt anybody. And they just did it on block and tackle. So they had 4 people up just pulling these things. And you watch it, it seems like seamless. This light goes down, the shadows move across the thing, and I was thinking of that idea, but I didn't really think we could achieve it. But you have a crew and they put everything they can into to try and make it work. And there you are,
That's definitely my favorite part about being on set as a
Yeah.
grip, is those moments where you get to work something out and it makes the day. You bring your experience
Yeah.
and your vision in part with the gaffer and the cinematographer, and then you're there at the screening, you're like, we did that thing.
Yeah. Oh, but some days it's like
Yeah.
the pre-light day. When in Budapest, we'd always have a pre-light because the things were so complicated. And you'd be standing there sort of like just watching the light and you're not distracted by anything else. And you think, wow, that's pretty clever what you've done there. Did you do that? You look above and it's just a block and tackle and a guy pulling it.
Well, on the back of any, like super villain screen, there's just a bunch of wires and pegboard and stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
But the collaboration part is so important, and it's important because you don't want to be on a set where people aren't collaborating, because why are you there? And it's important to listen to other people. And for instance, a really good director is a director that's secure enough not to feel like it's a threat to him or her. If someone else has another idea, they should take all those ideas in and then choose the one that they want. And then everybody else has had a say in it, and it's made your experience better. So
And that's something I'm assuming you've learned working with the same directors over time, is that they
that's
open
why
up
we
to that
pick 'em.
more. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I have a question for James.
Uh-oh.
I was
I
just-
don't know.
You said that sometimes you can be more approachable on set.
And so you probably have to have a lot of tedious conversations sometimes. And is there a part of the filmmaking process that ignites your passion that, like, what's one aspect that you really love?
I just love seeing the idea ahead of time and then seeing it put on film and then seeing it later after the edit. I guess I just love the whole thing of telling the story. It's very exciting to me, and it's exciting to know the script so well, then come on the set and see the actors say the line in a completely different way, and you realize, oh my God, that's so much better. And being on a set where they're flexible enough to go with the changes that are happening. I, I think it's the ongoing nature and seeing the story unfold that really excites me. So yes, I'm doing a lot of tedious stuff, but I get to see the other stuff too.
James, if you had to do a different job on set than the one you currently do, would you go back to script supervising? Would you edit? I mean, so I say on set in the filmmaking process. Would you?
I would not go back to script supervising. I would not do that. But I think I was in a closet one time because it was a handheld shot. So it was the operator, myself, and an AD, and we were waiting, for it to roll, and then we were going to walk out because I had to follow the camera too. And we were talking about the jobs that we wanted, and I was talking to the AD. I said, "Yeah, I think I would really like to be an AD," and the operator was appalled. He said, "Why in the world would you want to be an AD?" So I don't know. I don't know. I just like to organize things, I guess.
I've just heard you speak really passionately about edits and
Mhm.
about
Yeah.
cuts and stuff. And I know you edit your podcast.
Yeah,
So I didn't know if maybe, in another life you might have been a film editor or.
I think I would have been a director actually, but I like the creation of the story. And I love seeing how an edit can completely change what you thought you knew. Um, Sometimes it comes as kind of a shock, but when I was starting out, I was working in a film lab and knew nothing. I knew the film emulsion and everything, but I knew nothing about production or cutting. And an editor asked me to see a first cut, and I saw it and I said, "Oh, that's great." And he said, "But I'm thinking of changing this and that." And I thought, no, you can't do that, because I was so linear. And then he showed me the next cut, and he had cut out an entire character, and the film was so much better. And it made me realize you have to have that flexibility to not get stuck into something. And that's why an editor should be separate, because maybe you have this beautiful crane shot that costs so much money to do and took 8 to 10 hours to get, but it doesn't work for the story. And the editor, who wasn't on the set and didn't struggle or bleed for it, will say, "Yeah, it doesn't work," and pull it out. But
Do you think you successfully adopt that philosophy on set, being able to not get trapped with tunnel vision? It sounds like the assassination shot, for example, you were trying it one way and then completely went a different direction, threw it out the window and got the shot. Is that something you're regularly noticing yourself doing and working to make sure, to try to do, is to keep an open mind and not get.
I think you have to. I mean, like,
Mhm.
especially working with Joel and Ethan, I know they storyboard everything. I mean, and in the early days, I'd be part of that process more than I probably was in the last few films I did with them. But it's still open to change it on the day, depending what the actor brought to it, or just circumstance, or you get a feeling of the way the scene plays, and then. I mean, a number of times with them, you'd do the 2-shot or something, or do the wide shot, and then I'd say, "Well, which shoulder should we go over, to do coverage?" And they said, "Well, no, I think it's fine in that. We don't need any coverage." And you go, "Well, what are we going to do now? It's like 11 o'clock in the morning, and we've got nothing else scheduled." And that would happen quite a bit, and I think, yeah, you've got to be open to those sort of those possibilities, and
it makes for a much better film, but it's very hard, especially as you're in the shoot for quite a while and you're getting more and more tired. And it's very hard because part of you just wants to go home and go to bed. But you really need to still stay open and have kind of a fresh perspective on the story if you can.
I think that's the why what you say is why it's kind of really useful, valuable to have storyboards. And a number of people said to me, well, isn't that restrictive? You're just painting by numbers. I don't think so, because on those days, you know, the sort of 10th week and a 6-day week or whatever, and maybe you're not focused well, you've always got the backup. You've always got that security of knowing, well, this is what we need to do for the shoot for this scene. And it allows you, I think, to have more of an open mind to what the possibility might be.
I also think storyboarding is a great prep exercise because it makes you look at the scene and say, what is the important thing? The paper transfer in this scene is the most important. And so you're making sure there's a close-up or something, but you've talked about it and realized this is the scene where this character changes. So you've done all of that work and you really know what's important in the scene. And yes, you've done the storyboards, but when you get on the set and the actor's there and you realize you could do it a completely different way that would actually play up that point much more strongly. I think that's, you know that because you know what the important point of the scene is.
Well, it reminds me of the common expression that you have to know the rules to be able to break them.
Yeah.
But that's sort of, if
Yeah.
if you know what you need, you can, if you do something more creative or more interesting, then great. But as long as you have, yeah,
Yes,
makes perfect
right,
sense.
right.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
so much for your time. I was wondering, you spoke about your artistic process and staying true to your own tastes. The times where you have to throw your prep out the window and improvise on set, how often do you find your choices being sort of instant and affirmed? And how often do you find yourself leaning on your collaborators like James or your crew to make those choices?
Depends on the day, how tired you are.
I don't know, I don't really. Can you ask that again? I can't quite get my head round.
Just in terms of like staying true to your own artistic identity throughout all your having years and years of experience, have you found yourself to be more affirmed in your choices? Do you question yourself, you and your collaborators?
I would say I'm a perfect example of somebody who believes in imposter syndrome. I don't have any self-confidence at all. I really don't. I mean, obviously, I feel better sitting here now today than I did 10, 20, 30 years ago. But no, I think you're always insecure. And I think I embraced that early on, realized that I was always going to be nervous and insecure about what I was doing. And I kind of use it as a fuel, really. Yeah, you're never really sure about what you're doing, if you're doing the right thing, until you see the final product. Are you really, you know, cut together and get an audience's reaction to it, really? I mean, in terms of your personal sort of, I don't like the word art for a start, so that's what turned me off the question, really. I think you're just trying to interpret something that's in front of you as best you can. And you can only do it if you're being true to who you are. Like we were saying before, you can't copy somebody else. What would such and such person do on this scene or something? That doesn't mean anything. So you're always, yeah, you're always reaching for something that you hope is a personal reflection of some part of you. Yeah, you want to feel that, otherwise why are you doing it? But you can't always be 100% sure that what you're doing is right, because there is no right until the audience reacts to it, I think. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, and also maybe if you're too confident, then you're not asking yourself enough questions and you're going for maybe a solution that isn't the right solution. I think there's a good reason to question yourself and keep yourself.
Yeah, but and that's the excitement of it, isn't it? If you're trying something that you think is like, oh my God, yeah, then that's say, and you collaborate with other people to try and achieve something that you're always pushing yourself. I mean, you've got to be, otherwise you do it. Why are you doing it? You're not doing it by rote. If you're just sort of there, oh, I've done this before, I can put a light here and it'll be nice and soft and it'll look pretty, and I'll put on a 75 so the background's out of focus. What's the interest in that? You know, I think it's got to be some sort of personal relationship with the actors, the situation, the way the light is, the natural light. You know, I mean, I think it's that personal relationship is more important than anything else.
Do you keep getting that feeling of, you know, excitement and success when you manage to pull something together, you know, and it works out? Years later, watching the film again, do you get to kind of reconnect to that excitement, or is it really much it happens on the day, it's great, and then there's a different feeling when you watch the film?
It's,
I-
fu-
Go on.
it's funny because when we first see the movie, after it's cut together, we don't think it's very good because all we can see is the compromises and the things we didn't get to do and the things we meant to do. And so, oh, I don't think so. And then about 5 years later, we might see it on television and we'll go, huh, maybe it's not that bad. And we've been doing some remastering of some old titles and it's been great, actually. Those movies are okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're so into it when you're shooting and you see the first cut or the final cut. And it's, yeah, I mean, frankly, it's always a disappointment because James says you
You miss the shot you didn't get.
you're always trying to push yourself that bit more, achieve something else, really, I suppose.
I think, yeah, everybody, I think, feels that. One of the first, maybe the first film I ever keyed, when I went to see the screening, the cinematographer watched the first 2 minutes and then walked out into the lobby. He just said the color wasn't right. I just couldn't, you know, and yeah, I think it's a universal feeling that you're never gonna look at your work and be like, look at that great thing. It's always, oh, we should have done it that way. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's reassuring to know that even a 2-time Academy Award winning cinematographer is a human being.
Oh, he's very much a human being.
I'm going to change this up a little bit from grips and gaffers and things. What is your relationship with the unit stills photographers on set? And how do you collaborate and work together to get what they need as well as what you've been doing? And I've been told, James, that you have a big part in that communication and collaboration with the unit stills.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a job to do and it's good to try and make sure that they get the position that they want because then they're getting more of what the scene is. So it really is always a negotiation. Wait, don't forget, so-and-so needs to be here too.
Yeah, but it's like everybody, I was saying earlier, everybody on the set's got their own job to do. So you've got to kind of make way and understand and allow them to have that time. I mean, that's just the nature of the process, isn't it? You know.
But it's hard for the still photographer because they can't go in and get their spot until all of that work's been done and they don't know when it's exactly going to be done. So they're always at the last.
Yeah, and the hardest thing I always see is when the actor doesn't want the still photographer there, especially if we're running a camera. I mean, sometimes it's even on rehearsals, the actor doesn't want the still photographer there. So I find that, you know, I mean, I understand it, but that doesn't give the photographer much scope, you know. So then they're forced to sort of reconstruct what's happened, but they might not even be on set to see it. So it's kind of awkward.
I love seeing what they do too, because they do amazing work. I mean,
Yeah,
I love.
sometimes you go, well,
Yeah.
damn, I wish I'd done that.
Yeah, no, and they're really kind because they'll send me some of them afterwards. So I have these wonderful memories of the film in these beautifully framed shots. I mean, they really do incredible work.
We'll have one more question after this one, if anybody wants to get up and join, and then we'll move on to the signing. I'm good.
Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. Like we can all attest to how much your teamwork works on screen. We can all see the effects of this collaboration in every movie we watch, but can you both share maybe something about your personal partnership that you think is what makes it a success as well in life?
I think we started out working together and had a really good friendship. And because that was the start of our relationship, we can really easily, probably too easily, turn over to work. when needed. And there's always some work question that comes up and we can just make that flip without.
Yeah, I mean, we met working together before we had a, personal relationship, if you like, call it that. I always think we went on a date during the shoot we were on, but James seems to think it wasn't actually a date. We just went to see some movies. But I thought it was a date, but anyway. But after the movie finished shooting, then we got together.
But I think it's important to be able to share. I mean, certainly the way everybody's relationship is different. And yes, I understand that some people don't want to be together 24 hours a day. You know, they'd rather go off and do what they do and then come back and share it. But we're the opposite. So we have formed a way of talking about it. And you know, when you're shooting, you're under a lot of stress and pressure. So you really have to be able to talk about things.
Thanks.
Well, we're at that point. So I first want to thank Chapman Leonard and Quixote for helping provide some of the equipment and some swag that's over there for the event. So thank you to them. If there's any representatives in the audience, I know they were invited. Thank you, guys. And then I would like to invite all of you to join me in thanking Roger and James Deakins for their time today.
No, thank you. Thank you.